edition of our viewer mailbag. Let's see what's on your mind today. Tom, have you got the first question?
Yeah, this comes from Mrs. P. She says, if you could give one piece of advice to your newly qualified teachers or recently qualified self, what would it be and why?
Oh, dead easy. Sort your calendar out. Go to the central office, whoever's in charge of the central diary, find every single diary date from the photographer to sports day to assessment weeks to statutory exam weeks, put them all in the diary in one colour. Then go back through, put things in the diary for yourself to balance out those kind of pinch points in the diary, whether that be holidays, family visits, birthdays, whatever, and ring fence those, just like you wouldn't cancel the photographer, you wouldn't cancel going to see your sister. So keep those in the diary so that you've got an overview of the entire academic year, so you can see where the ebb and flow is. And then you've also got stuff for yourself to be a little bit more restorative. So sort your calendar out. What would be yours, Tom?
That is great advice. Mine would be all about behaviour management, because when I was a beginning teacher, I used to get pretty stressed by classes I couldn't control very easily, and I used to get very emotional about it, and I'd shout a lot and take it all very personally. And if I could just go and put my arm around myself and say, look, just relax, let the system take the strain, refer people up, get support, and try to distance yourself a bit emotionally from what's going on. They're teenagers. They don't hate you. You're just, and that would be my big advice. To just feel that, to acknowledge the emotions, but kind of give a way forward to let people support you in that. That's what I'd be saying. And I think I didn't really realise that. I thought everyone else just had it sussed and it was my fault. And I would definitely say, no, it's not. Look, lots of people have these kind of issues.
Yeah, behaviour.
Okay, here's a question. Oh, what you go for the next one.
Okay, right. So how can we support colleagues? This is from Lucy Flower. How can we support colleagues to rebuild confidence after a career setback?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's something I've experienced many times. I think the main thing is to control the things that you can control. So there are things you can do which are to, for a start, recognize that it's a fairly common thing that happens to lots of people. The emotions are natural. But what can I do? Well, I can set up initiatives. I can try something in my class. I can make my lessons feel enjoyable. I can write something about teaching that I want to write. And I can do things that I can control. And then when I get another opportunity to try another school, I've got maybe a little bit more to talk about, and it puts me on the front foot. And not to worry about the competition. You can't worry about how the interview went or anything like that, because it's not really about the performance at the moment. If someone else gets the job over you, that was probably always going to happen, and that's part of life. So don't over worry about the process. Just think about, okay, from now on I'm going to try this and that, and just add to your sort of breadth of experience within the setting that you can control.
Yeah, and the setting's really important, because it might not be that it's you that's wrong. It might be the setting that's not right. So I always say, for every pot there's a lid. go where you have a fit between the pot and the lid. Find the setting that matches your needs completely, and also recognize that your career isn't an upward trajectory, or you can have a more patchwork approach to your career. Go sideways, whatever.
Yeah, right. I totally agree with that. It's all like getting experiences, isn't it, and enjoying each of them. So okay, Sarah is asking us. Okay, next one. Sarah is asking us, how do we support staff who've given up like loads of their holidays and stuff in this recent time, and then going into the winter to cope with a really busy term? How do we support people?
I don't think it's about supporting people. I think it's looking at the system and making massive changes. We've all been through the biggest changes education's ever been through. And it's not about adopting some of the really, truly inefficient, grind you down systems that we had before. Neither is it about a tokenistic, let's all have a cake because we're tired in the staff room on a Friday kind of approach. It's actually looking at what we're expecting of our teachers. Are we being realistic? What is it that we're actually trying to achieve? And making sure that our systems that we have in school are really nimble, really agile, and really, really lean, and absolutely focused on, and I talk about it all the time, that organisational edge, the bit that actually impacts on the children and the communities that we serve. And if it doesn't improve anything for them, why are we doing it?
Yeah, I totally get that. I think that's the thing. Strip it all out. Do we really need it? And if the answer is even a slight question, leave it. And then and focus on planning lessons and teaching lessons as much as possible, and almost nothing else if you can get to that.
Yeah. And next question is from somebody who knows all about lean, the martial artist and fantastic principal that is Sam Strickland. So he asks, what evidence is there to suggest that online lessons are the silver bullet?
Okay, well, Sam is asking a devious question there because he knows the answer is that there isn't any. There is evidence. There's a good recent study. The Education Endowment Foundation has done a paper on this, looking at things like, does it make a difference if you teach through online lessons live or asynchronous? And I think there's a study around that, and there are some studies around whether or not you need to see the teacher's face or just the slides. And I think again, it's all these things are pretty even. But there isn't a silver bullet, is there? And we know that, and there are loads of contexts. And for me, the killer thing there is, if 20% of your students can't access online learning because of their circumstances, it's not fair. So that just kills it stone dead. Anyway, so it's a good question, but he knows the answer.
Not like Sam to be like that. Right, so thanks everybody for sending in the great questions. For viewers out there, make sure to use the hashtag #AskTomandEmma to send in your questions. And if you do, we might well feature them on the show in the upcoming episodes.
Hello everybody, welcome to this episode where we're delighted to be talking to Robyn Jackson, who is a fantastic educator with an incredible back catalogue of videos and books that she's going to talk to us about, and we're really thrilled to talk to you. One thing I'm going to kick off with, Robyn, is just something which Emma and I noted earlier together, and we were looking at some of your videos, that you have these very cool videos where you seem to be writing in the air, and it appears... and we want to know, this is the hardcore question, are you writing backwards on a screen, or is it some kind of tech?
We are doing a lot of magical wizardry in the room. We built a studio to allow me to be able to do that. And so based on how the studio is set up, it looks as if I'm writing backwards, but I'm not.
Oh, wow. The skill.
I'll have to add that to my superpowers, but I do not have the superpower of writing backwards quite yet.
But it's fantastic. So, when people go and look up your stuff, I mean, it's there on your Twitter and so on, but it's really clever actually, because you get this visual and you're kind of in it. It's really clever. So
Thank you.
The proper question I wanted to start off with, is this idea of building. That you have this whole idea about building as a leadership paradigm and sort of set against other things. And I think it's really interesting. You have a hashtag and everything goes with it. So for you to, maybe this is a way of you sort of telling people a bit about what you're doing at the moment, but what is this idea of building? What does it mean?
So a few years ago, when I was trying to help some schools transform, I realized that the tools of leadership were never going to get the job done, because leadership is something that was designed by the institution. You started out with an institution, you had one-room schoolhouses, you had teachers, and then you thought, oh my goodness, somebody needs to supervise all these teachers, so let's create a principal. And so the idea of leadership and the tools of leadership that we've been traditionally taught are designed to maintain the institution as it is, to maintain the status quo. But if you want to transform the institution, you can't use the same tools that created the institution. And I was reading an article in, I think, 2009 by a man named Amir Haque. I think I've got it right. He's a Harvard Business Review writer. And he wrote an article about this idea of being a builder rather than being a leader. And he created this distinction between being a boss, a leader, and a builder. And one of the things he said that stuck with me, and I've been saying it ever since, was that bosses say, go, leaders say, let's go, but builders say, come. And I loved that distinction, because that's really what I think education needs right now. We are beyond the era where the principal sat in the office and just kind of dictated orders, or the superintendent hid in his tower and dictated orders. We're in the era where people are saying, let's go. So I see people wasting a lot of time and energy trying to drag people to their goals. Whereas being a builder says, I'm going to step away from all of this. I'm going to go out and I'm going to envision something better. And then I'm going to start building it. I'm going to walk the talk first. And as I'm doing that, then other people can start to believe that it's possible because they see me building it. And then I invite them to join me in building. So I'm not in front of you trying to take you somewhere I've never been. I'm not behind you pushing you towards a future you don't understand or even want. I am there building, and I'm inviting you, and then I'm deputizing you to become a builder. So I say builders build builders. So when you have everybody working, it's not just you trying to drag your school to your goals. Everybody is working and building. That's how you can create something better for students.
That's fantastic. So have you found that's cut through to people then? Do you feel this idea, this concept, when you're working with leaders and teachers, do you find that they embrace that, and is it kind of helping them?
Yes. I mean, people, when they really understand buildership, they can't go back. Once you see it, once you understand it, it's hard to go back to leadership because you start to realize all of the things that you're doing as a leader create more problems. They are exercises in futility. They waste time. Once you understand being a builder, people, they can't go back. They don't want that anymore. They want to get out and start building. It's what they've been hungering for. They just didn't know it existed. A lot of people who are hungry to really make a difference, and they're trying to do it with the tools they've been given. When they understand that there's something else out there, that there is buildership, they think, this is the thing that I've been looking for. So it's really resonating.
Oh, I absolutely loved it, Doc. And I'm going to introduce you as Dr. Robyn Jackson. Credit where credit's due. I was watching one of your videos today, and I absolutely loved the quote that you said about builders at the beginning have to believe something nobody else believes yet and see something that nobody else yet sees. I absolutely loved that. That was like complete magic. And then I went to watch the bit about how you then get people on board, about the innovators and the early adopters. So for anybody who hasn't yet seen your videos on that, and I got asked a question last night in a webinar about how do you take reluctant people with you. I'd love to hear you explain that process.
Sure. So a lot of times leadership teaches you that you can't move until you get the reluctant people on board. And so we try to steamroll our ideas, or we try to convince and cajole people. And, there's a quote going around on social media right now about how if you shame people into action, you get acting. And you have to do something more than that. And I think that a lot of leadership gets people acting, but in their hearts, you haven't changed their minds. And so in buildership, we look at that process as a real process. And so when you have reluctant people, first thing is you don't try to steamroll them. You understand that they have what appears to them to be very valid reasons for their reluctance. And so instead of trying to kind of wait until they come aboard or trying to drag them to your goal, what you do is you work on the converted first. The people who are ready to go, they get impatient when you say we have to wait until these other people come on board. And then people start resorting to all kinds of tactics that don't work. Instead, get those people building, because the more that you get people building, the more that it goes up, the more people see that it is possible, and that becomes more convincing than the argument that you're making about something you haven't built yet. So that's the first thing. You want to invest in the people who are ready to go and get them building right away, because that's how you start to make progress. And then the other thing is that there are two kinds of calls to action. So the first kind of call to action is, the complete call to action. We want to build this. Are you with me? And there's some people who say yes, and those people get them building. Then there's some people who say, I don't know, or they'll say, no, that doesn't look like something I want to do. And so you have to have a transitional call to action. It's kind of like if you walk up to somebody you've never met before and you say, hey, my name's Robyn. I'm cool. You're cool. Will you marry me? And some people are going to say, yeah, I'd like to marry you, and that's great. But then the other people are going to be like, I don't know you yet. So you need a transitional call to action, which is that for those people who are reluctant to commit to the entire thing, what you want to do is say, okay, I get that and I understand that. Would you be willing to take the next step, which is to explore it further? And then once you got them saying yes, then you're cooking with gas. You're ready to go, because those people, if they take the next step with you and they say, I'm willing to explore it further, then you go through that exploration stage, and then you say, okay, now that we've explored it, now that we've, kind of talked about some of the things that are making you reluctant, are you willing to at least try it? And so we have a process. We call it the 6 E's of transformation. I need a better name, but that's what people started calling it when we taught it, where it's about walking those reluctant people through those 6 steps. And they are excite, explore, engage, expect, evaluate, extend, and embed. That's 7 E's, but there we go. So the idea is that each of those stages accounts for the will and skill issues that come up that contribute to people's reluctance. And if you are strategic about understanding that there are going to be reluctant people, and if you use those 6 stages to help people who are reluctant create those micro commitments rather than asking for the great big commitment, you can get those reluctant people to become builders and join you in building. Or those reluctant people will say, I'm absolutely convinced this is not going to work, and they will go somewhere else. Either way, you haven't gotten rid of anybody. Either way, you haven't let a certain group of people derail or hold your plans hostage. And by the way, you also are getting the builders who are ready to go building. And so at the end of that journey, you actually have something done and accomplished.
In your work, is this around? I'm fascinated by this model. I think it's really, really powerful in its potential. Are you talking about, say, things like a curriculum change, or are you talking about sort of more detailed things like a type of approach to teaching? Because I know that you've written loads of books about instruction and instructional teaching and so on as well. So is that where it applies, like in the classroom, or is it sort of bigger? What sorts of things does it apply to?
All of the above. So one of the things that we teach, we have a conference, a 3-day training that we do called Builders Lab. And it follows what we call the buildership model. So the first thing you start with always is your vision, mission, and core values. You have to get those established because that's what anchors the work.
That was my pad. I've actually written that on my pad from your...
It's funny. I never thought I would be the spokesperson for vision statements. I mean, that was not how I saw my career going. And yet I keep coming back to that, because if you're not anchored in the vision for 100% of your students, then what are you doing? Like, what are you building? So you have to establish what you're building. You have to create that vision for people. And then to answer your question, Tom, the process then says, okay, if we're going to achieve this vision, if we're going to live out this mission, if we're going to really make these core values non-negotiable, what is our biggest obstacle? And that obstacle might be an instructional change. That obstacle might be as big as a curriculum adoption. That obstacle might be something as subtle as adjusting things in our culture or adjusting the way that we deal with kids or parents. That obstacle, whatever it is, it's keeping you from achieving your vision in your school. And the process is about dismantling that obstacle and getting everybody on board and creating the kind of behavior change or institutional change that actually sticks, so that it doesn't go away as soon as the program goes away or as soon as we stop talking about it, but you actually embed that change in your culture, and you've now cleared the way to make your vision more likely.
That sounds fantastic. There's another thing I was going to ask you about, and I don't know if Emma has read this bit as well. The book called, now this to me is just like music to my ears. I love this so much. Never work harder than your students.
Yeah, everybody loves that title.
And this is the word here, and I love the fact that you spell it differently, because one of the things that I've written about in one of my books is rigor, RIGOUR, and you just drop the U for whatever reason. I mean, that's there's whole thing about rigor and making students work harder than you. I love that. So you're preaching to me there. I mean, are those the sorts of things that you're still sort of addressing through your work, as well as the kind of leadership aspect?
Yeah, when I started talking about the 7 principles of effective instruction, and never work harder than your students. It's one of those principles, and the idea of rigor. And what I found is that when I went to share this information with teachers would get really excited about being able to teach that way. And then they would always say, but my administrator expects me to teach this way. And so one of the reasons that I shifted the focus to focus on administrators was because I started to realize that if we wanted to have the kind of sweeping instructional changes that I was advocating for, it couldn't happen one teacher by one teacher. It had to happen systemically. And then when I started working with administrators, I started realizing that a lot of the reason why they were unintentionally blocking the very instruction they said they wanted was because they were stuck in these leadership paradigms that were about maintaining the institution above all else, rather than about being bold enough to unleash this great teaching in all of their classrooms and all of their schools. And so that's kind of the evolution of the work, and that's where I am right now. And that's where we're starting to see the big changes, that when you look at a principal who really adopts this a buildership approach, now they've created an environment where teachers can never work harder than their students because they're not bogged down by a lot of the administrative demands that I think really hold teachers back from being able to do what they believe is really important for kids.
Because you've got that 7-point model, and then I went on to read some more of your work and look at some more of your videos, and I was looking at the one that said about effective instruction is context agnostic. The current, and that there was no new COVID principle.
Yeah, I use the term context agnostic, and a friend of mine who's in marketing said that is a horrible term, right? Because it is those are 50-cent words. Can you find a simpler way to say it? I'm looking for a simpler way to say it, which is why I'm laughing at the context agnostic. But the idea that
I like the rhythm of it. I really like
I do too. Like, I love it. I love words. So I think it's awesome, but people in marketing are like, no, you need to use one syllable words, and those are 50-cent words.
I'm with you.
Thank you. You and I together can make this term sticky. But, but the idea about context agnostic has been really something that I've been really, kind of doubling down on during the quarantines, because, and it's funny because when I wrote Never Work Harder Than Your Students, and talked about those 7 principles, shortly after that, the Common Core took over, right? So everybody was scrambling to rewrite their books. So it's Never Work Harder Than Your Students and the Common Core, like that. And the temptation was there. Do I need to do that? But when I went back and looked at the principles and I looked at what the Common Core was doing, I said, no. I mean, the principles really are timeless. And every single crisis or every single major movement in education that's happened since then, culturally competent teaching, looking at trauma-informed instruction, all of these things that people are talking about, I go back and I look at the principles and I say, do I need to kind of update? And no, the answer is always no, because if they're going to be principles, they must be timeless, and they must be not only context agnostic, but teaching style agnostic, administration agnostic, country agnostic. It doesn't matter where you teach or who you teach, the principles still have to apply, or they're not principles. So you're right, there is no new COVID principle involved, because if they're really principles, they should. And the beautiful part about that is once you understand these principles and practice them, you don't have to worry about changing them 2 years later when a new administration comes in, or 3 years later when there's a new trend in education. The principles will still serve you.
I think that's interesting because we talk a lot about context in the UK in terms of things like schools where you've got a higher proportion of students from deprived backgrounds, or in a COVID scenario, you've got things like some schools where everyone has a computer at home and they're teaching like a full timetable all day long. So there are those sorts of details, but actually behind those principles are things to do with instructional teaching, engaging students, interacting with them, and so on. So it's a kind of nuanced thing. I think that's fascinating. Tell us, before we, I think it's fantastic for me to discover this sort of body of work which has been going on in parallel in the US around instructional leadership, instructional, ideas like rigor and so on. But you've got this. Tell us about this latest thing that you've been doing. Is it the Lab 360? What is that? I don't want to get it wrong. Tell us what it is, because that sounds really interesting.
So we have been doing for several years a conference called Builders Lab, and it's 3 days of, it's not even a conference, it's an intensive. You come for 3 days, you learn the buildership model, and then you go back and implement it in your school. And when the quarantine hit and travel bans happened, we were worried about how we were going to still provide this really meaningful training when we couldn't travel. And so we had to kind of cancel the venues. And then we said, should we cancel Builders Lab? But I really feel like now more than ever, people need this model to help them lead their schools through this crisis and any other crisis that they may encounter. So we decided to take it online, but I didn't want an online conference the way that I was seeing them kind of start manifesting, where it's, a 3-day long Zoom meeting where I drag you through my slides and every once in a while check in and say, is everybody still awake? Can everybody still hear me? Thumbs up if you can still hear me. I didn't want that. So what we decided to do is create an immersive 360-degree experience, and we're calling it Builders Lab 360, or BL 360 for short. So we tore up our offices. We built out a stage in the office so that I can do some presentations from the stage. We've been playing around the technology so that we can have people in different mentorship groups. We have opportunities for people to work with our coaches one-on-one during the 3 days. We have, we're going to be sending people, this is my favorite part, which is we're sending people a box, and in the box is everything that they need to be successful. So we have the Builders Lab manual, it's 200 pages. We have, a couple of little surprises. Builders Lab, one of the things we're known for is that we have popcorn breaks in the afternoon. So how do we still get people the popcorn breaks? We're thinking about all those things. But the idea is that we want to give people this really immersive experience that helps them become builders. And then we're also following up with them for the next 90 days. So it's not just 3 days of training, but it's a 3-month commitment that we're making to people so that we can help them implement what they've learned over the next 3 months and actually see some progress happen. So that's what we're working on now. And it's been a lot of fun to reimagine what professional development looks like. We've been experimenting a lot. And I think just this week, we finally think we've hit on what that can look like. And we've tried it out with some of our clients and it's working beautifully. So I'm so excited about it.
I've literally, just before I came on here, finished an article about writing new CPD courses during COVID. I'm now going to do it.
So you're going to have to send it to me. I need to see this article because we're devouring everything we can find so that we can practice what we preach. We don't want to tell you go out and make meaningful learning experiences either in, person to, context agnostic learning experiences. And we don't do the same thing. So I'd love to read it.
Okay.
Well, I shall send it to you then.
Thank you.
So look,
Thank you.
We're going to have to wrap it up now. But honestly, Robyn, it's been really great to talk to you. I'm really inspired talking to you. It's fantastic. And I've got a few new things to think about. Context agnostic, but also popcorn breaks. I think this is the thing. We've been missing. That's where we've been going wrong. So
it's life-changing.
That's
when you send out your walkthroughs, Tom, when you send out your walkthrough packages, I know exactly what's going in there now.
You heard it here. Popcorn breaks. Honestly, Dr. Robyn Jackson, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you. Oh, wow. Wasn't that great? Honestly, I just love talking to Dr. Robyn, and I apologize for not putting her title in there. She was honestly absolutely awesome. And I think what I love about her is that she's got this sort of background of working on pedagogy, teaching, instructional teaching, the word rigor, which is music to my ears. But then she's talked us through how she then has this whole, she's got to get that embedded. So you've got to think about leadership structures and this concept of building. I think that's a really fascinating process, and it's got a sort of depth to it and intelligence to it, which I just was brilliant. So I'm so interested. I want to go and read her books now.
One of the things we didn't touch on with her, which I would absolutely love to know more about, is her belief that every teacher can become a master teacher as well. So I'm going to go away and kind of dig into some of her work about becoming a master teacher. But I think that something that was just said off air that we probably need to say that was absolutely useful was about COVID and CPD and work at the moment. When life makes you nervous, focus on service. I absolutely adore it. And we didn't catch it in the interview. So thank you, Dr. Robyn. What a beautiful message to end on, the whole profession. Thank you.